Karanjia, you've recently completed 50 years as an editor and 57 years in journalism, and you've been editor of Blitz since 1941.
Quite.
And there hasn't been, you haven't missed an issue since then.
Not really. Not really.
As an editor, and you had, Blitz has had a very special stamp, in a sense. You were perhaps the first out in a tabloid form of journalism.
Quite.
What has been your philosophy as an editor that sort of determines the parameters of what you put out?
It's all support to the people, popular causes, popular crusades. So ultimately, I was in the Times of India, then I had a stint with the standard newspapers, Today's Express, the Sunday Standard and the Morning Standard, and I felt that not enough importance was given to the voice of the people. While they claim that Vox Populi is Vox Dei, the voice of the people found just a little corner, say 6-7 inches. So I decided to bring out a paper, a tabloid. I'd worked in the Daily Mirror in London for some time, a paper which reflected the mind, the heart, the pulse of the people. So we had no staff, we had no reporters, we had no correspondents. Our columns were filled by letters from the people, correspondence, real correspondence. They gave us front page stories. For example, Punjab Mail murder case. We liberated an innocent man and got the guilty man, who happened to be the military secretary of a princeling. Accused.
Is that what led to you being honored in the Akal Takht in the Golden Temple?
Oh, no.
What was that?
That was much later. That was Master Tara Singh and Sant Fateh Singh. They were having some kind of agitation. And Kairon, who was then the chief minister of the Punjab, had imposed Section 144. No speeches, a complete blanket ban on everything. I defied the ban. I went there, I spoke. And I received the saropa and a lot of daggers and swords. And it was quite an experience.
Your career has been sort of punctuated by a number of defamation cases, libel, and a lot of sort of embroiled in legal...
I think I paid the largest fine in the history of the British judiciary. 3 lakhs of rupees, 6% interest, total cost.
What was that for?
It was in the Thacker-Say libel suit. In those days, Feroz Gandhi, the father of the Prime Minister, and I, used to run campaigns together. He in Parliament, I in Blitz. Thus we fought the famous Mundra case. You remember? It was big headlines all day. And then after that came the Thacker-Say case. Unfortunately, the day I published the whole thing, Feroz died. And somehow the documents were not available to me. But it was reduced in appeal.
Has it ever worried you that you're up against this all the time?
Because I realized that this is the job. This is the excitement, the adventure. I never bothered about the other side.
Has there been ever been an expose that later on you have regretted or you have found was not true?
Oh, whenever I find something before the thing goes to the courts, we apologize. There's nothing wrong in apologizing. One can make mistakes.
How often does that happen?
Once or twice, not many times.
In the entire span of Blitz?
Entire span. After all, that is tabloid journalism. It is the whole idea, concept of tabloid journalism is to humanize, to dramatize, to pictorialize, and to sensationalize. It's a new form of journalism which I first brought to this country, with the result at one time the Time magazine of New York They had a full page devoted to me as the father of yellow journalism.
How did you react to that?
Because I knew that was the journalism of the future. What we did and was decried as yellow journalism, today it's called investigative journalism. People are getting awards, prizes, everything for that.
You mentioned sort of the pictorial aspect some time ago.
Yeah.
And I think you were perhaps the first publication to come up with the equivalent of the page 3 girl on your back page.
On the back page. It's much better.
What prompted that?
Prompted just to give the people, it's a serious or political weekly. People need some relaxation in this tension-ridden world. We gave them this kind of relaxation, something beautiful, something decent, nothing vulgar about it. In fact, once or twice I was taken to the courts, and each time we were acquitted, thoroughly exonerated.
Have you had a feminist response to that ever?
Feminists, no, they don't seem to mind it. Because you see, the feminist response, after all, they take the paper as a whole. Here is a paper which is serious, which always fought for feminist causes, which stood for them. Some of their finest writers have been writing for them.
Such as?
Pardon?
Such as?
There was Ava Patel, who was Ava Patel, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, a whole Violet Alva. A whole number of them have been writing for them.
In Blitz, through Blitz, you have been, you've had the opportunity of interviewing a host of celebrities. Brezhnev, Khrushchev, Sadat, Winston Churchill,
Tito,
and the list is endless.
Nasser, not Sadat.
You got an award from Nasser for your efforts in forging Arab unity.
That's a big story in a law. One of my finest achievements, I think. During those days, Nasser and Khrushchev were on a collision course. And Krishna Menon suggested that I meet both of them and give them an opportunity to say what they want, take the steam off their hearts and minds, and come to some kind of an agreement. So I took it on as a experimental. And I went and interviewed Nasser. In fact, I helped Nasser to go all out in his attack to what he called the Soviet ambitions to create a fertile red crescent, Egypt, Syria, and Iraq, that region. And then I went to the Soviet embassy in London, showed them this piece. Says, what do you say to this? So they said, we thought Blitz was a progressive paper. This is libel, this is defamation, this is capitalist, all the usual Soviet abuse. So I said, all right, this is my card, this is my address. If you want me, bring me up. The very next day, 2-3 cars with very serious-looking gentlemen came up to my room in the hotel and wanted me instantly to get into the car and go to the Soviet embassy. I went there. The ambassador was a totally different man. He received me, congratulated me and said that, well, we want you in Moscow tomorrow. I said, tomorrow? No. I mean, I've got my work to do. I mean, after 2 or 3 days, I'll tell you when I want to go. So ultimately, I persuaded them. After 3 days, they took me to Moscow, put me up in the Kremlin Palace, and from there to the president's chamber, one of the palace office rather. It was again a procession of 7-8 cars. I went there, I met Khrushchev. We had a wonderful time because the first thing that the interpreter told me was that Comrade Karanjia, His Excellency, says you are unbalanced. Unbalanced? Then it came out that Khrushchev meant that my eyebrows were very heavy and my mustaches were very thin in those days. So my face was unbalanced. So, he put me completely at ease. We had vodka after vodka, toast after toast to my mother, father, Jawaharlal Nehru, Krishna Menon, Indo-Soviet friendship, all kinds of things. And ultimately we had a long interview. He called, he said that Nasser was riding a tiger and people who ride tigers fall. all that kind of thing. Then, after both, he got the steam off his heart. I told him that, look, here is the Aswan Dam. It's not a matter of Nasser arresting a few communists or maybe hanging one or two of them. It's not a matter of retaliation. You are losing an opportunity to build the finest monument to Soviet cooperation with the Third World, the Aswan Dam. It struck his mind, he thought. Then the interview was adjourned because Soekarno was coming and he had to receive Soekarno. The interview started again after dinner at 12:30, and Soekarno was there too.
12:30 at night?
12:30. No, even I think it was around 1 o'clock, more than 12:30. And I was sozzled, all of us were sozzled. Soekarno, Khrushchev, myself. And I pressed home the point that this is a monument to the Third World, the Aswan Dam. You forget your quarrels and your polemics. Nasser, I'll make him forget his quarrels and polemics. You build the Aswan Dam. Soekarno begged me up. And he was a great orator, a very emotional person. And by the end of the talk, about 3 o'clock in the morning, Khrushchev told me to go back to your friend Nasser and tell him that I'm not only going to build a half of the Aswan Dam, I'm not going to allow the Americans and the French or the Germans to spoil the other half. I'll build all 3 stages. And also tell him to get back his engineers because they are demanding their, commission. I went back. Nasser was delighted because he was already having a lot of trouble. I think the Americans were there and the Germans were there involved, and they were making their own conditions. Nasser was delighted. He held a banquet and gave me the highest award of his state, the Order of the Nile.
You also had considerable sort of interaction with Gandhiji. You did a story in the Wardha ashram, and then sort of, which was a very negative story, and
something I regret.
And then you donated your earnings from that to a trust.
That's how I first met Jawaharlal Nehru. I wrote a very nasty piece on Gandhi for the Times of India publication. I think it was the Evening News. And I was very friendly with a girl, Babs Talia Khan. Her father was a judge of the Bombay High Court, Justice F.S. Talia Khan, father of Bobby and Rusi and all the entire family. So it was he who invited me to dinner and put me face to face with Jawaharlal Nehru and told him, I showed you that piece yesterday. Here is the author. Give him a bit of your mind. And Nehru let me have it. He says, young man, he says, you've got to grow up. Journalism is not a profession for such writings and all that. So after dinner, we had a long talk. And Nehru made me not only write a letter of apology to Gandhiji, but give him the 250 rupees I got for that piece of nonsense.
What are your further sort of other impressions and memories of Gandhiji? Did you meet him?
Gandhiji was, no, I didn't meet him, but Nehru talks about him in very emotional terms in one of my books. For example, when Nehru heard of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 2 whole cities being destroyed for no purpose, because according to our thinking at that time, the Japanese were on the verge of surrender. So Nehru took the deep anguish of his heart to Gandhiji and almost broke down in tears. Nehru tells me all this. And Gandhiji just meditated, sat there very solemnly. And for a few minutes he was completely lost in thought. Then he spoke, as if Nehru heard the third voice, saying that now you realize, now I realize what God created me for and what God gave me this mantra of non-violence, bloodless struggle for. This is, now there cannot be any more wars. Wars have become so horribly destructive that this is the last. There cannot be another Hiroshima. There cannot be another Nagasaki. And so Nehru looked up, he tells me, and said, what will be the answer? He says, Satyagraha. That would be the answer.
Are you optimistic about the future of India?
Oh, I'm always optimistic. A great country like this, with 5,000 years of history behind us, with the Vedas and the fantastic books of knowledge, the most precious heritage that history could have provided any nation, nobody is going to blot it out.
But
Most
yet we
certainly
seem
not.
to be sort of out of touch with that heritage.
No, I don't think. The one great thing about the Nehrus and the Gandhis is that they are deeply involved. They may not like to admit it, but whether it is Jawaharlal, whether it was Indira, whether after discovery of India, that's the heritage. That book is written by Jawaharlal Nehru. I think that is one thing that makes them, what shall I call it, indispensable. They somehow fill every nook and corner of the country with their image, with their charisma, with their personality. That, I think, is due to the fact that they embody that heritage. One may be old-fashioned, one may be very modern, but basically the heritage is there.
If I could take you back in time,
Yeah.
when, as a war correspondent,
Yeah.
you were working in India and you were imprisoned by the Japanese, or with your
No, I was imprisoned by Japanese.
but you were captured by the Japanese and then released.
My jeep blew up during the retreat from Singapore, and I found myself looking at a very dear friend of mine, General Themaya's brother, Major Themaya. It was the Indian National Army. Now the Japanese gave special treatment to Indians in the hope that they may join the Indian National Army. So I was saved. I don't know what happened to my other companions. I was taken to Themaya, and Themaya immediately sent me to the 8th Squadron of the Royal Air Force, which was commanded by an Indian. I think it was Mukherjee, or I'm not quite sure about it. And he gave me, I was carrying a dynamite, a packet, which contained photos and stories of the Indian National Army, the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, and all that kind of thing. Unfortunately, I was caught at
By the British this time.
by the British, Calcutta airport, and I was stripped. The packet was found on my body, and they might have arrested me or court-martialed me, but for the fact that Brigadier Ivor Jehu, who was formerly my editor, and I was his favorite sub-editor in the Times of India, he immediately rushed to Calcutta, rescued me, and of course I was stripped of my uniform. I couldn't be a war correspondent. I lost my rank of a lieutenant colonel, but we had a gentleman's agreement that I would keep silent about the whole incident. So would they, and as and when this story could be made public, this packet would be returned to me. And I must say, the British were gentlemen. They kept their word, and I was the first to come out with the story of the Indian National Army.
You also had a brush with American intelligence in your career.
Oh, yes.
And-
you imagine
and
Lucy
Krishna
Karanjia at CIA. It might have happened, yeah. Krishna Menon saved me.
What was the story?
You see, I was certainly not anti-American. I was, during the war years, I was all for the Allied war effort.
You wore American uniform.
I wore American uniform. I was had the rank of lieutenant colonel or major, I don't know, whatever it was at that time. And I had an interview with General Lucius Clay. He was the military governor on behalf of the Allies of occupied Germany. And we got on very well for some reason or the other. He gave me a long interview. In fact, we had photos inscribed, so Lucius Taylor and Lucy Karanjia and all that kind of thing. And then he asked me to come again. Somebody wants to meet you. Next morning, I went to the American military headquarters, and I found Alan Dulles, brother of John Foster. He was then the chief of the OSS. That is the American intelligence.
The sort of predecessor of CIA.
Father and mother of the CIA. And he said, we had a nice talk. He measured me up. I suppose he approved. And then he asked me to luncheon at one of the posh restaurants belonging to the American. I think it was in the IG Farben building, yeah. And he sold me a fantastic story that he told me that, do you know, Stalin has gone bonkers. The war, the pressures of the war, have blown his mind. And we want to save him. We got a remarkably aggressive and popular publication. We would give you articles, stories, warning Stalin of the conspiracy against him. He says, we are giving these articles to all leftist papers. You see, we are giving them to a paper in France, a paper in Britain, and so far as India is concerned, we have selected Blitz. And we'll pay you handsomely. But I said, yeah, you give me the story, you pay me for the story, I don't need payment. The story is good enough. Very fortunately, I was going to send them home for publication, and they would have appeared in Blitz. But very fortunately, I happened to talk to Krishna Menon on the telephone. And Krishna told me, for God's sake, do you know who Alan Dulles is? I said, well, he's the OSS chief. He told me to stop everything. First plane, your life is in danger. He said, you just come back here immediately. I rushed home.
Does it happen very often, sort of planting of stories? Does it still happen?
Well, I suppose it happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are stories here which are,
without giving away sort of trade secrets, is there an example that you could give us?
I'll give you. I think Bofors. Mm-hmm. I think Fairfax. These are major plants in this country.
By whom? By whom?
By the same source, Mr. Alan Dulles' successors. Mm-hmm. I feel so. I may be wrong.
Would it be fair to say that you have been friends with people in power?
Why not? Friends with people in power, friends with people out of power. My best friends, in fact, I have said during my recent celebrations of my 50 years of editorship, I have made it quite clear that my life has been a love affair, a love story with the people at the other end. The common people, my staff, I have had exceptional, there's no time to relate them. When, for example, I paid the highest fine in the history, I just mentioned it. The next day when I went to the office, rather depressed, I found Balraj Sahni, Santosh's wife, and a whole group of people ready with their checkbooks to help me out. And as soon as I sat down on my table, lo and behold, my staff comes to me, a letter from them, something which moved me to tears, a letter from them, offering me their, what is it called, the fund, their...
Provident Fund.
Provident Fund, which ran into lakhs, offering me, almost mortgaging it to me. So God has been very, very kind to me. You know, it's a love story. Mm-hmm. There's nothing less than a love story.
What about the people at the receiving end of some of your sensational stories? Have you ever interacted with them?
Yeah, they have been very much. When I was fined 10,000 rupees for a libel against the Hindustan Times, the Devdas Gandhi Blitz case. We walked out of the court because we thought that the judge was favoring the other party, but that's nothing to do with the story. I went abroad soon after. There was a conference in Geneva. Krishna Menon wanted me to be with him. And I escaped Patil. Came and handed over an envelope to my wife to say, just give it to Rusi when he comes back. And lo and behold, it contained exactly 10,000 rupees in notes. Afterwards, there was a kind of a morning meeting for Frank Maurice. And Patil was speaking. He was speaking about Frank Maurice, myself, himself. And he said that, you see, between us, there is this kind of a friendship. We don't allow politics to come between us and friendly relations. And he gave the example how Rusi was fined 10,000 rupees for an attack on Birla's paper. It was G.D. Birla who asked me to give 10,000 rupees because G.D. Birla felt that that justice had been kind of perverted. So this kind of relationships did exist in our time. Somehow today, something has happened. The world has narrowed down. We don't find, if I attack somebody, he thinks of me as his enemy. Now, I have thrice destroyed Moraji's career with attacks and Blitz, but we are friends. Every time I pass him, he stands like that, and I have to give him my ear, and he pulls my ear. Now, this, I think, is the kind of attitude which belonged to the old generation, and especially to the freedom generation, and particularly the Congress party. I would like that to come back again.
When you're not being a journalist,
Yeah.
you're being a husband, your wife passed away some time back, but father.
Yeah.
What is the philosophy of life that you hold up for your family?
Very liberal. Take my daughter. I have only one daughter. We gave her, my wife and I, complete freedom. In school, in college, when she was abroad studying journalism, and she lived up to that. She's, I think, one of the finest girls.
She's editor of a film magazine.
So, yeah, she edits the Cine Blitz, and she's made a very great success of it. So you see this liberalism, total liberalism. I would never interfere, say, in my daughter's affairs or whatever it is, or my family's affairs. Each one should stand on his or her own feet.
I suppose journalism has dominated so much of your life.
Yeah.
But what else has moved and driven you?
Oh, many things. I was working for the Chamber of Princes, where I learned to ride and play polo.
Surely that was contrary to your worldview to work for the Chamber of Princes.
Well, Times of India loaned me, but after 8 months I got tired of doing nothing but indulging in wine, women and polo. So I went back to the Times of India. Well, more recently I'm not able to play polo anymore because of a fracture in my knee, but I've taken to yoga.
You mentioned women. Are you
deep into yoga, yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sort of yoga to women.
Yeah.
Are you disturbed by the growing promiscuity of our times?
Oh no, there's no such thing as it was there all the time in my time. I have myself indulged in it, and I see nothing wrong with it, so long as you don't lose your head. As the Greeks say, do everything in moderation. Be virtuous in moderation, sin in moderation, womanize, drink, everything in moderation.